First of all, I'm like extremely humbled. This is a wonderful turnout. And I think that in the time that Doug and I spend with you, you're going to find it very, very worthwhile. I have been the director of coaching education for since June 25th of 2012. And I was on the job about a week, and I was approached with USA Weightlifting and the NSCA have to find some way to work together. And it is beneficial to both. And so finally, last February, Michael Masick, who was our CEO, and he is now the CEO of USA Weightlifting, he goes, get in the car, we're driving over. And so we drove over, and I met with Scott and Doug, and we said, we need to be collaborative. It is in the interests of both organizations that we show exactly how collaborative we can be. And so this is the first of what we hope to be an ongoing relationship between USA Weightlifting and the NSCA in a way that benefits you and all the athletes that are under your guise. And so when you look at that kind of stewardship, Doug is an incredible resource. Not only is he RSCC with the NSCA, he is an advanced sports performance coach with USA Weightlifting, and he competed at our American Open. So he's an athlete. He is equally proficient in both worlds. That's tough. And I think that this is where the future is going to be. So what I would like to do at this moment, I think it's really important that Doug kind of give his backstory to you so you can understand that there is no reason that the two organizations can't thrive to the benefit of everybody in this room and the athletes that you coach. Doug?
Thanks, man. Yeah, so I'll try not to run on with this, but I was fortunate enough when I very first started my first field experience back in 2007 when I was still an undergrad to work with a gentleman by the name of Todd Baden in Toledo, Ohio. And Todd he was also a member of both organizations and used the Olympic lifts for all of his young athletes, well, young and old. And with this, so going up, my very first introduction to weightlifting was I went up to meet him months before I was supposed to start my practicum with him. And I got there, he said, oh, hi, I'm Todd Baden. Hey, we have a weightlifting meet right now. I have you down as a loader. 2 minutes into meeting him. So then I have to go in, and as most of you know, pounds to kilos, not easy when you're first starting. So I'm a loader in a local weightlifting meet, and trying as hard as I can to convert, and it's not so well, but didn't work out so well. So fast forward a couple months, I start with him, and after seeing the meet, I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. And during that time, I was into bodybuilding, and I wanted to get away from that and more into like numbers-oriented things. So I tried it out, and I was like, yeah, if I'm gonna try and coach these movements, I need to be able to at least see what it feels like, right? Try them out, or prove to my athletes that I can also do them. So tried them out, did a little training cycle, got bit by the bug, competed in my first meet, and kind of, as they say, the rest is history. So I've been now about 8 years with competing as well as coaching the movements. And really quick, I'd just like to say my biggest thing, or what kind of sets me apart as a younger strength coach, I think is my experience with the weightlifting movements and my knowledge of the movements. And I feel that a lot of times, so how many people have done the movements one time or another, tried them out? Okay. How many people have done them but do not coach them? Or maybe not, you're afraid of coaching them. They're intimidating. No? I was hoping for more hands than that. We'll pretend that more people put their hands up. I think that a lot of times I see coaches are intimidated to coach the movements, so they keep them out of their program completely. But at the same time, if you work hard to be able to develop your coach's eye to coach these movements, you can coach any other movements after this. So once I learned, it opened up my whole world of coaching and strength and conditioning to be a better strength coach for my athletes. So that's kind of my short story.
Good, thanks. All right, so the first thing we want to talk about in the idea of where we are in this is so Doug and I are having breakfast this morning, and we're getting ready to go through this and how to make it effective and how to make it practical and how to honor probably the most difficult thing that you see in the strength and conditioning arena, where time is absolutely out of premium. You know, everything is time effective, time costly, time expansive. And so when we look at the weightlifting movements, they have these benefits to them. And so Doug is talking and he goes, do you have anything in your files and all the time you've been involved in this, do you have anything that gives the rationale behind why strength and conditioning coaches should consider the weightlifting movements as part of their training programs? And I just started, and this is terrible, I started laughing because no, I don't have anything. I have what Boyd Epley suggested back in 1999, and I just stuck it into, so this, I am now going to tell you what you told me 17 years ago, all right? This is the NSCA. And so the thing that was interesting about it was when they talked about why do you want to use the Olympic lifts? Now here's the caveat. Every benefit that can be derived from the weightlifting movements is equally detrimental if they aren't taught correctly. They have to be. Technique drives the program. Everything that you do in the weightlifting movements is skill set orientated. But here are the things that were said back in 1999. This is kind of fancy. I use this. Her name is Sarah Cardinal. She ended up being a thrower. She was from Idaho, which is my hometown. At one time, she was the youth national record holder in the women's 75K class, and she was also the youth national record holder in the hammer and in the weight throw. And she went off and was a thrower for the University of Utah, where her freshman year, she qualified for nationals in all 4 throws. And so the thing is this is kind of fancy. It says, sports skills are initiated by applying force to the ground with the feet. The more force applied, the faster the athlete will run or throw, and the more effective they will be. What Boyd said was this in a nutshell. Sport is played on your feet. You might want to train on your feet. And that makes sense to everybody. The second thing that was added in this was that most sports involve joint actions timed in proper neuromuscular patterns. Isolating single joint actions may improve the athletic's appearance, but in order to be effective in sport, there's timing. You do not hit a golf ball far because you hit it hard. You hit a golf ball far because you hit it correctly. Timing is everything. And so when you're looking at sport where you're releasing implements, the crucial instant as they used to call it, and whether or not you had follow through and how effective is this technique as applied to the next technique. The idea is there a philosophy? And certainly in USA Weightlifting, we have this philosophy where we believe that strength skills and sport skills are interdependent upon one another. They're not independent of one another. Three-dimensional movement, okay? Sport skills. The greatest benefit of weightlifting movements is you have a dynamic, ballistic change of direction. Sport is dynamic, ballistic, and change of direction. So it makes perfect sense that if you're going to train for neural recruitment and you're going to train for a skill set, that once again, sport takes place in this three-dimensional plane, up and down, forward and back, side to side. I find it interesting that we spend a tremendous amount of time teaching form tackling, teaching form running, and yet when you're in sport, when you're inside the key in basketball, or you're inside the line of scrimmage, or you're playing sport, it's pandemonium. And so people are moving in every direction, every which way they can. And so if you train for that dynamic ballistic change of direction, then you have the neural pattern, and it's all about motor movement. The whole thing is moving at the correct time. And the final thing is, of course, is that we want to suggest that you train explosively, okay? There have been some studies that have shown that if you use the weightlifting movements correctly, and what we mean by correctly is that the neural recruitment trumps how much you lift. How much you lift is secondary to how well you're lifting it. And there have been studies that have shown that if you snatch, clean, jerk, there has been some studies that show that start positions out of the blocks, whether it's swimming or track and field, you can actually improve those times. So there is a carryover. And so once again, this was said back in 1999, and to be honest, I think it's fairly applicable today. So we would want you to consider. Now, in the real gist of what we're talking about, it's this. When we're looking at what we want athletes to achieve, we all want to improve performance. We all know that increased work capacity is a component of improved performance. We also know that doing things correctly has carryover. And of course, what we want to do, very, very important, is that we want to reduce or even eliminate injury. So when you get really kind of three-dimensional in your approach, when you're talking to your athletes, in the back of your mind, all four of these things are going on. This is what we want. We want our athletes to achieve. We want our athletes to perform. We want to create competent, confident, and effective athletes. And we want to be that way as coaches as well. So when you look at it, and this is nothing new, this is something that weightlifting has done for decades. The methodology that we suggest is the top-down, part-whole, progressive movements. So you begin, there was a teacher in education, his name was Ralph Tyler, and he wrote a very famous teaching education book called Rigor and Relevance, and it was called Backwards Design. Start at the end and move forward, move backwards to the beginning. And in weightlifting, start at the end and move towards the beginning. Because when you teach backwards design in weightlifting, the remediation is built into the progressions. And so when you're doing things in those manners, if the athlete cannot snatch, what is the most difficult thing to do in weightlifting? Pull from the floor. That is the hardest part in all of weightlifting. And so what we do is we teach the athlete a finished position, then we slowly start moving down. And all of these weightlifting exercises, and here's where we are with this over in the corner, the little gray-haired man, that's Zygmunt, okay, he's our coach. This is really what I'm going to share with you over the next half hour. Zygmunt's ability is this. He can recognize an error. He does not coach the error correction. He creates an exercise that strengthens the lever so the athlete can hold the position and create the lift correctly. So instead of saying, flatten your back, Zygmunt puts them into a position where they are forced to have a flat back and gives them a partial movement until he strengthens it. Because here's the hardest thing. If you follow the suggestions that we are going to make today, you will be able to teach technique while the athlete is training. This has always been the big question that I get. I don't have time to give up to do this. What we are going to share with you today is you don't have to give up to get. You can get it both. You can train the athlete and improve technique at the exact same time. This is what the idea behind the advanced movements are. Now, here's another thing that comes from a coaching standpoint. We have to change the conversation to where we think conceptually and act practically. No one knows your athletes better than you. When I first started coaching, I did what most young coaches from the 1980s did. What would insert the name of everybody who mentored me? And then all of a sudden one day I said, what am I going to do? What are you going to do? How are you going to take what we share with you today and turn it into a beneficial exercise for your athletes? That is very difficult because the challenge is this. How do you individualize group training? We have a methodology we think that will address that. So the thing is, I don't want anybody to go home and say, what would Conroy do? I don't want to be me, okay? So for heaven's sakes, I don't want you to be me. And I'll give you an example. I always share this. When you talk to your athletes, please demonstrate your lifts. So in 1991, Mike Catone, right over there, we were the junior squad coaches for a Christmas camp. And I was talking with Lynn Jones, and I had the eccentric slide snatch, okay, high hang, eccentric slide snatch. Lynn Jones goes, learn the terminology. It's snatch from the knees. And I go, okay. So I go into the weight room, warm up, 3 sets of 3, 70%, snatch from knees. And you guys already know where this is going. Phone rings, Robert Murphy, I don't know how I got in my dorm room last night. I didn't register. So I go, so we're on the phone. In comes this kid named Steve Conley. And he goes, Coach Conroy, those snatches from the knees, man, they're like hard. And I go, oh my gosh, oh yeah, you know, here's the national junior squad. Ah! You know, and the camp kind of went downhill from there for Mike and I. And so please demonstrate so that you avoid being me. So the idea is that, once again, is that when you're looking at what we're talking about, I'm going to go through these slides kind of quickly because basically this is what these are. Years ago, we used to break lifts into alphabets. There were A lifts, B lifts, C lifts, D lifts, E lifts, and then you would go in and train and you would do 2 A's, a B, and a D. You know, you would do these kinds of things. So what we've done here is we've just placed these lifts in some exercise categories merely for the idea of the difference between the competition lifts as opposed to the derivatives. Now, here's an approach. So we have lift-related, remedial exercises, and we want to give you a menu that's big enough that when you identify what the concern is, you can address it. And so the lifts that we're going to share with you today are the lifts that are most commonly done by the US resident team. And here's the difference. Your snatch and your clean and jerk are the end result of all the training that you do so you can snatch and clean and jerk. You do not fix the snatch by doing more full snatches. You correct the snatch by using derivatives. And so what we're asking you to consider is this. When you put a weightlifting movement into your training program, think of all the derivatives that you do. Because you know the problem that coaches can fall into is that we get ritualistic. We have certain things that are our go-to lifts. And then what happens is, you know this, If every day you go out and run an 8-minute mile, you're gonna get real good at running 8-minute miles. And what we have to do is we gotta change the conversation for our athletes so that they understand that what they are doing is what they need to be doing. So here's an example. I still coach my own Idaho weightlifting club. I'm inside the district office of the school district I've been with for 35 years. And school year starts. I always have my freshmen, they're off the blocks almost the entire year. And so I have a senior, he's pretty good, and his name is Lucas Warburton, and Lucas is snatching from the floor, and I got this freshman kid, Donovan Fudge, and he's snatching off the high blocks, and he turns to me, and we're in a long hallway, and he goes, Coach Conroy, how come I'm snatching off the blocks and Lucas is snatching off the floor? And Lucas shouts back at him, because I'm better than you are. Okay. And so but the thing is Lucas had forgotten that his freshman year, he was off the blocks as well. And so you know this, there's an athlete's quadrant. Quadrant 1, what are the skills that the athlete needs to know? Quadrant 2, can they do those skills? Can they do those skills? Quadrant 3, can they do those skills routinely and automatically? And quadrant 4, can they do those skills routinely and automatically in a unique situation, which for weightlifters is competition. So every athlete goes through those quadrants at their own pace. And the hardest thing is the Donovan-Lucas conversation. You take the athlete from where they are and they progress at their own rate. And so the difficulty of that is that we get really competitive. Look, this is how competitive we are. Every time I cross the street, they're timing me. 5, 4, 3, and then I find myself picking up the pace. Yeah, I blew that off in 2.9. You know, I'm out of my mind. And so when you're looking at that kind of mentality that approaches it, you know that you have athletes who believe that dogged determination can defy the laws that govern the universe. And we have to get them to understand that for their benefit, they have to do things correctly. And then the more often they do it correctly, the better they become at that. So with that being said, and you take a look at these, so when you're looking, now here's what's really unique about USA Weightlifting. If Zygmunt is having our resident team snatch, I guarantee you this may actually be the entire workout. They'll start with presses and snatch at about 30%. They'll move to a combination movement at about 60%. They'll go to a low block or snatch without moving feet to about 80%. Now here's why. This is very important to understand. And I apologize for saying that because I'm talking to a group of individuals collectively that get this. Learning takes place somewhere between 70 and 80% of a 1-rep max. And here's why. Once the weight gets over 80%, you might be able to encourage, but you can't coach. They have to do it. And in fact, if you start giving them coaching cues, it's that famous paralysis by analysis. So somewhere along the line, they have to go. In weightlifting, we suggest 80% of the time you train at 80%, and then you go above and below that. But what you can do, most of these skill sets have been based on force plate power production. So we're going to ask you that when you're using these exercises, here are the 2 parameters. 1, think sets over reps. We're trying to improve power performance. And studies have shown it's pretty much 1, 2, and down it goes. So it's better to have them do 3 sets of 3, 5 sets of 3 than it has to have them do 3 sets of 10. Okay? So, and then the other thing is you want to work them at a percentages where they can learn, do it correctly, and actually be coached. And that happens around 70 to to 80%. You get higher than that, you can encourage them, but you really can't talk to them. Okay? So the first one is, this is called a press in snatch. And basically, this is merely a warm-up that we do for our athletes. This is Ellen Kircher. And so now there's two ways to do this. This is the perfect way to do it. You get in the bottom position and you press up. If you have athletes that have difficulty getting into that bottom position, well, of course, they can do snatch grip presses behind the neck. The idea of this is that we're trying to get the athlete to focus on, as they pull under the weight, they actively push up against the bar. A lot of times you see athletes, when they snatch, it's almost a free fall. Or the infamous one in the clean is where they get to the bottom position before and then the barbell just crashes down on them. This teaches the athlete to push up against the bar while they are wedging themselves under. One of the nice things about combination lifts is that when you're looking at how combination lifts works, this is what I want you to consider. When I am training athletes in other sports, one of my most favorite derivatives is I either put them on the blocks or on the floor. They will do 2 pulls, 1 power movement, and so if they're snatching, they do 2 snatch pulls, 1 power snatch, 2 overhead squats. They do that 3 times, that's a set. That's 15 movements. You do 3 sets, you got 45 movements in like 10 minutes. So it's a wonderful way to work capacity. Plus, I can talk to them. They're pulling the bar close. When they turn the bar over, they learn how to push up of it. When they squat down, they push up against the bar. So when you're looking at combination movements, you can be as creative as you need to be when looking at the combination movements. So in this one here, this is Jenny Arthur. Jenny had an amazing world championships for us in Houston in November. So once again, off the low block, and I'll explain the low block here in a moment. So she pulls, and she power snatches, and the idea is it's just learning curves. She learns to keep the bar close, the arms long, stand straight up, and then mimics that again in the pull. Because you know, and those of you that coach, once again, to kind of give you a demonstration here, I mean, you've all seen this, and you've all coached this. If this isn't the most common thing, pull, snatch, and you say, oh, I'm pretty sure I don't teach it that way, so the difficult part is how, way back in '84, the Finns found out that when athletes pull, it doesn't look like the pull phase of the lift because they're more concentrating on standing up, they're over obsessed, and that when they do the lift, the first thing they're trying to do is kind of wedge themselves underneath. So the idea behind this is that you can teach timing. Now, here's the idea on the low block. If you can raise the bar off the platform just a couple of inches, the athletes learn 2 things. 1, they understand what being flat-footed is. We talk about, hey, you gotta stay flat-footed, you gotta wait for the bar to come back to you. And then a lot of times, as soon as the lift happens, they lose their composure. Once again, the most important skill that you learn in weightlifting is patience. And waiting for that bar to come back to you is crazy. And so when we go off the block, when you set the block up off the ground, what happens is you allow the weightlifter to shift back. And the true core, the abs, the low back, the glute, and the hamstrings get involved. A lot of people say, well, I'm not very flexible. You have to develop the levers that allow you to hold the bar in position. And so a lot of times we aren't practicing are strengthening the muscles that we need in order to hold the positions correctly. So once again, this is Jenny. And if you'll notice as she gets set, she gets her elbows and knees in the same plane, flattens the back, and then the bar comes right up. And so those are the kinds of things that we're trying to get the athlete to understand. Okay? Now, this is one of our favorite ones. The idea behind snatching without moving your feet. You get the athlete to put their feet in their land position. Now, you know this. Here's the universal concept. Front squat, back squat, overhead squat, power snatch, power clean, clean snatch. Your feet are all in the same position. Why would they be in other positions? That's where you're your strongest. So you have to get the athlete. If you'll notice, Americans are really strange about that when we classically snatch and when we power snatch, our feet land in different positions. That's a different exercise. So this is my Norik Vardanyan story. So I'm out at the training center in 2007. 2008, I'm the nanny while the team's in Beijing. And I'm working out, and Norik is looking at me. And I go, what? He goes, nothing. I said, what? Coach Conroy, what's it like to live long enough to see your skills leave you? And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, you're all over the place. Your feet, I go, and of course, you know, his father was a 7-time world champion and a 2-time Olympic champion. He goes, my dad says this, power snatch, land your feet exactly where they should be in the snatch, and then squat. You get instant feedback. Have your athletes do this. The first time they do it and they get ready to squat, watch them move their feet, because they're not landing their feet in the same place. And they need to, because that's where they get their strongest power production. So Norik goes, this is what my dad does. And so Norik taught me how to power snatch, overhead squat. He taught me how to power clean, front squat. And it's a wonderful derivative. Then he said, this idea of snatching with your feet in the land position, you have to wait forever for the bar to come back to you. And then you better stand up and wedge under. It's a great, great skill to get athletes to stop foot stomping, and it's a wonderful skill for athletes to learn to let the bar come back to them. When the second pull, if you believe in the 3 pulls, first pull, floor to the brush. Second pull, brush to the extension. The most important pull, the pull under. That when the second pull is faster than the first, the bar doesn't have a chance to get horizontal displacement, and when you pull under, the bar comes right with you. So this exercise, only like 2 to 3 sets at 80%, is wonderful because it teaches the athlete to be patient and accelerate at the correct time. This is so if you'll watch, this is Mike. Watch very closely on the feet. He'll raise the heels up, but he won't move them. And then he pulls under. Look how straight he is. This is an amazing exercise. And and can you imagine, because you know this, it takes more energy to stay on the ground than it does to move. So this is a wonderful, beneficial exercise for improving strength and power. This one, once again, the snatch stop after start. Somebody sent me a video of this, of Klokov doing this at a clinic where he did this at 190 kilos. And somebody goes, this is amazing. David Rigert of this former Soviet Union, he was doing this exercise in the 70s. And what it is you pull the bar off the floor and you wait. You stop the momentum. And it teaches the athlete where being balanced and flat-footed is prior to the acceleration of the lift.
He actually did 200 at Houston.
Did he really
In
do?
the training hall.
Yeah.
200.
Yeah, but he had straps. So the athlete comes off the floor, pauses, and then completes the lift. And so it teaches them two things. It teaches them how to be balanced, and then it teaches them also how to accelerate. Beautiful. Doug, your turn.
Well, I don't know if there's any talking points left after Mike got on a roll. I do want to mention, I know we just went over all the snatches, but these are obviously very weightlifting specific, right, to the sport. You know, we're going to cover some jerk ones that are especially very specific to the sport of weightlifting. But one thing to keep in mind is that with every exercise is going to have multiple benefits, right? Multiple ways that you can use them. So don't just look at these through the lens of this is only for weightlifting, right? This can be beneficial to your athletes because of other reasons, okay? So the next two that we'll cover are kind of complexes. So with this three-stage clean, we're starting off of the blocks or the power position, depending on what equipment you have available, where you're in a hang position, okay, if you don't have blocks. From there, you move to above the knee and then below the knee. So you do 1 rep of each. So benefits to your athletes would be, you know, this is obviously a conditioning, more of a conditioning demand than just doing like a single rep, right? Also, in learning the movements, as Mike said, the higher you start, there's that built-in remedial portion of it. So if you have athletes who are terrible from the floor, because we all know that that's extremely hard to do, then you start them in a power position, right? So that's limited range of motion. That's essentially less time that they can screw it up, but also this teaches them right from this position that they can only push this much. So because of that, they actually have to work on their rate of force production, correct? Does that make sense? So they have short amount of time, short amount of distance to push through the floor. So that's a very good position to increase their rate of force development or production, okay? Going to above the knee and then finally below the knee, which is a little harder because you have to move the knees out of the way or transition through the knees, okay? We'll take a look at the video and go through it.
Now, there's one comment here that I want to make, and I guess I should pause this for just a second. In weightlifting, we do a thing that's called clustering. So when you watch a set of 3, you're going to see him reset each time. And so the idea is that what we're trying to do is we're trying to reinforce proper pulling technique each time. Later on, when they get good, you can strap them up or however you would like to do it. But in this one here, you'll notice he'll do it from the 1 position, reset the bar, do it from the 2nd position, reset the bar, and do it from the 3rd position.
And if we think of everything in progressions, you can see built into this, right after here, as we go to above the knee, he's essentially doing an RDL, right? An RDL is built into that movement. So to get to above the knee and below the knee. So as one of the foundational movements to be more efficient for this, and eventually the clean from the floor would be an RDL. And one thing I also forgot to mention is when you are starting, or your athletes are starting at a higher position, whether it's snatch or clean, they have to not only develop quicker force because of that shorter range of motion, but they also have to be quicker under the bar. So this requires that they be quicker under their bar to receive it in the proper position. Right, if we think about on the field athletics or on the court, change of direction, right? Quick change of direction. So that's what your athletes may be getting out of that as well. So again, looking at multiple movements within one, and as Mike said here, you have 2 pulls to a power clean to 2 front squats. So again, conditioning is built into this, and when I say conditioning, I'm not talking cardiovascular necessarily, right? If your athletes are really out of shape, they might get some cardiovascular benefit, but what I mean is maybe power endurance, right? So doing multiple reps, but doing them quickly so they could increase their power endurance from this exercise, as well as strength benefits with the front squats and that. So with this, we're also looking at keeping the bar closer, so reinforcing proper pulling technique and the proper bar path, and also the proper landing position, as Mike alluded to. So reinforcing the proper bar path and the proper foot position. And we see athletes who move their feet out too wide on the catch, right? This is a big error. It happens a lot. We see this a lot. So when we use the low blocks, that almost limits how far the athlete can jump their feet out as well. So that's almost like a physical cue right in itself. And those athletes who may not have problems with moving their feet, but if they just are not comfortable in catching in a full clean, you haven't got to the point wherever they start, whether it's starting from the floor to a full front squat, right, a traditional squat clean, or if they're starting in one of the hang positions above or below the knee and catching in a full squat. If they have trouble with that, then going from power clean to a front squat teaches that transition. So eventually they get more and more comfortable and catching straight into the full squat. Make sense? Okay. Do you have that clicker?
Yes,
Use that.
go right ahead.
Thanks. So clean from the low block. Again, as Mike mentioned, and I see this a lot, coaches, when they first use weightlifting movements with their athletes, they want to go right to the floor, right? That's the bread and butter. That's what's cool. But a lot of times, most times, athletes aren't going to be ready for that, right? There's not that proper progression top down into that. And it's the hardest place to pull from. Why? Improper bar path. The knees get in the way a lot because a lot of times that transition of sweeping the knees back, or whatever terminology you want to use, getting the knees out of the way into the proper position is hard for athletes to learn. So starting from blocks brings the bar up, decreases the range of motion, and because of that, they don't have to worry so much about smacking their knee every time, which then allows them to focus more on the movement and not hurting their knee every rep, okay? So with that, as I mentioned, proper bar trajectory, and strengthen transition muscles, we're talking hamstrings, glutes. It's that, I think I have it in here, holding that position, right, that I think it was Snatch from after stopping. We have the same one, I think, in the progression next. So it strengthens those muscles to be able to allow and teach the athlete to keep their shoulders over the bar in the proper pulling position.
Okay, that's the last.
Clean without moving feet.
Yeah.
So similar to the snatch, and many of you know the only real difference between the snatch and the clean is the hand position on the bar and the final catch position. So Mike stole all of my talking points on most of these slides. So with this, I will say the one thing I think of as a strength coach mostly is talking ground reaction forces, and when we think of physics, and most of us have taken biomechanics and physics in our classwork, the impulse momentum relationship. So force times time equals mass times velocity. So assuming that we're, right, in this exercise, we're not moving our feet, we have to push through the floor and produce force longer throughout the movement to get that return. So where it says that, bar speed is significantly slower, that's because you don't have, think of it like if you followed any of Brian Mann's stuff and he's talking about speed benches, okay, versus like a medicine ball throw, right? We all know that you spend more time decelerating than accelerating if you're holding on to the implement, right? It's just a protective mechanism that our body goes through. So similar here, because we're not actually moving our feet and releasing, it's my thought anyways, that it's more of a protective mechanism that we're gonna just naturally decelerate throughout the movement. So that's why you have to continue to focus to push through the ground longer, which is going to, in effect, help your athletes with more force production. Clean stop after start. So very similar to the snatch one. Again, strengthening the levers, hamstrings, glutes, low back, abs. Nothing new there with that one, similar to the snatch. Okay. Jerk movements. So press and split. This one is not only, so we're right here in the split position and we're just pressing here, normally from blocks. So with this one, you're not only obviously getting upper body strength from this, but you're also working on staying stable throughout the entire body. So, I mean, that's like kind of a no-brainer in how that would help your athletes, right? You need to have a strong and stable trunk in order to produce force throughout your entire body. Okay? I'm going to start that one.
Now, just one comment here. This is Jessica Lucero, and she is doing this exercise with 35 kilos, so like 77 pounds. And at the World Championships this November in the 58 kilo class, weighing 128, she clean and jerked 110, which is 242. So you kind of get the relationship between where press and split begins in relationship to the final amount of weight that you're lifting.
Okay. Jerk step. I actually don't have much experience with this one. I do know how it's performed, so I'm going to let Mike talk on this a little bit and how they use it at the training center. But how I've seen them use at the training center is it's an overloaded movement where they're here with a lot of weight, heavy for the individual, and they step out into their jerk position and step back. So as far as how it could benefit your athletes, you know, you have an overload right here, probably upwards of what you're front squatting, and you're moving with that load up top, which is, you know, it's gonna raise your center of mass and increase the stabilization that needs to take place as your body is moving, which is, again, especially for impact sports, think football and rugby, that's gonna be pretty beneficial.
The main thing that we do is, and in one of the further exercises I'll show you, is this. You know this. Our opinion of ourselves is usually incorrect. I know that all of your athletes and all of my athletes think this. Here it is in reality, right? So what we're trying to do is,
that didn't look much different.
Why don't we put that and move it? See, so the idea behind it is that what's the number one thing? We do a thing called rotary drive. We dip, lean into it, and boom, the foot hits early. So the idea of the jerk step is that you get used to, I mean, It really is a long way when you say, well, it's only 1.5 shoe widths or whatever it is. But in reality, they don't understand how far it is that you have to step. And if you're familiar with the great John Murray out of England, who invented the Murray cross, he drew that T square in the platform and had his British athletes so that people knew where those feet were to hit. It's really just a motor memory thing to teach the athlete how to step further, because in most cases that they don't. So we'll show you that one. So once again, you'll just see the athlete, it's just kind of reinforcing how far that front foot needs to go to be knee behind the toe and the shin as close to a vertical line as possible. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So sometimes I wonder how I can stand up when I have both feet in my mouth. And so I was in the training center one day, and I've got the video of it. So Ellen Kircher, who's been on our junior world team, she's a resident athlete, she's doing these split cleans off of blocks. She's going like this. And so I go, is this the 1940s? And she looks at me and she goes, it's a jerk exercise. And the reason we work it off the block is because we don't want to be focused on the pull. We want to be focused on stepping through, okay? Now, I know that some people will have the athletes do this, come back, and do it the other way. That is certainly a preference. That's something that can be considered. We normally in weightlifting, we already know which foot is going forward. But if you do jerk movements, and you have athletes who just have a tremendous problem with rotary drive, where they lean into it and the front foot hits early, or the worst thing ever is they back jerk, they kind of lean back into it. This idea of doing the split clean off the blocks gives them an idea of how to stay balanced. You'll see Ellen do some correctly. You'll watch Courtney Batchelor, who's been on our world team. She does one right, she does one wrong, and then she comes back like most elite athletes and corrects it. So you can kind of see how it's beneficial. Once again, if you use jerks, oh, thanks, Doug. If you use jerks in your training. So this is Ellen. Oh, I got the sound on in this one. So as you can see, she's keeping her shoulders up, she's stepping through, and her feet are right where we want them to be for the jerk. On Courtney here, she does the first one right, the second one, she doesn't get through far enough, and so the bar's low, but then she comes back up. So once again, they get vertical and step through. This, when Zygmunt put this into our training for the resident team, our resident athletes very seldom miss jerks now. This is part of, they probably do this exercise twice a week. See how low it is? So it teaches the athlete, and it's low because she didn't step far enough. It's that idea of how far you need to step. Thanks, Doug.
I will say too, a lot of times when a lift is either missed or something happens incorrectly up top, a lot of times coaches want to blame something up here, right? They think something up top is the problem. When in reality, it's the feet. A lot of times you got to look at the feet. So that's one kind of cue or way that you can fix things is just quicker feet. Because the quicker the feet are, the quicker the overall lift is going to be. So they're much more able to get under that bar faster. So jerk behind plus jerk. With this, this is one of my favorite exercises, generally from the blocks again. So you start, set up, squat under the bar. You have it on your back here. So you start here, right? And then instead of just dropping it, like a lot of people just drop it right to the blocks and reposition. I've been working the last year with Paul Fleschler. He's actually had me just eccentrically bring it down to the front. It's killer, especially when you're doing heavy weight, but from all that eccentric work, you get super strong overhead. I broke a lot of huge PRs, jumped up. Whoops. Just in a short amount of time by doing that exercise. So extremely beneficial for overhead strength. Did I do that again?
I think I'm having a stroke. Yeah, it's my fault. Oh, I see. Don't do that. I'm 63. That was bad.
But the biggest thing I see with, he's all over the place. Biggest thing I see with overhead movements like presses, push press, jerk, is that coaches always yell elbows up, elbows up. Well, if your elbows are up super high here, then when you go overhead, you're essentially doing a tricep extension, right? Or the second thing is the athlete drops the elbows first before going overhead anyways. So why not start with your elbows down underneath the bar, right? Because this right here is a vertical line, which is then going to drive the bar in a vertical line, okay? So what this does is reinforces because they're starting behind the neck first. Most athletes aren't going to press over their head. I know I don't have the mobility to do it by starting with their elbows here and then jerking when the bar's behind their neck, right? That's impossible. So it forces the elbows down and the forearms in a straight perpendicular line from the ground, right? And then right overhead, bring it down to the front, and then that reinforced pattern then transfers to the front in the next rep, okay? So that's one of the big reasons why that is put into athletes' programs.
Great. So what we're going to do now is Doug has been kind enough. I can't think of anything worse than trying to do the Olympic lifts on a carpet. But what Doug's going to do is he's going to, now that you saw it on video, but you realize that in three-dimensional space it looks different. So Doug, what do you want to do?
I wasn't paying attention. You pick.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, so here's what we do when we're training our athletes. So why don't we just do the progressions? Let's go ahead and do some snatches, and we'll start off with a snatch pull to a power snatch. Okay.
We'll just get the tens?
Yeah, we can put the tens.
I will say.
You realize you have to put the collars on because you got to, okay. Go ahead. You have now signed the waiver that you're not using collars. You are on your own, my son.
These glasses don't fall off.
So the idea is what you're seeing there is you want to, and you know this, if you're going to watch for barbell trajectory, you want to really kind of stay at the side so you can see it. Because what you really want to do, we want to minimize horizontal displacement. It is a vertical sport. So the hardest thing is, if you watch really efficient lifters like Doug, their hips open up, but the barbell drives up. What we do not want is, I'm going to pull this in and kick this baby to another area code and see what happens. We want to minimize that horizontal displacement. So now, please, a power snatch to an overhead squat. That's good. We don't want you to. Yeah, excuse me. You got to move them on this one. Yeah. And then he squats. And the thing that's so nice about this exercise, it is self-correcting. And watch them, they'll move. And they get that feedback, and it makes it easier for them to correct the exercise on their own. You want to do a snatch without moving your feet? Okay.
Never done this one, so.
Oh, well then you can pass on it. Okay. Get your feet in your land position.
Not intentionally, never move my feet. I should say that.
There it is. Yeah. All right, try it. There it is, right there. And what's so beautiful about that, once again, these exercises are self-correcting. Okay. And what we want to do now, because I know that we got 20 minutes left and we got to let you get to the next thing. So thank you so much, Doug, for doing that. I would really like to defer the majority of the questions to Doug because he is in both arenas. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask either generally or specifically of one or the other of us, and we'll entertain them. Yes?
Did you lose any of the technique pieces from not going from a block? You don't have blocks?
Oh, no. Now, good.
Start from you see what I'm saying?
Here we go. This is perfect. Thank you. Because, you can only have what you use. And you'll notice that sometimes when we're off the low blocks, we're actually using bumper plates. But the crazy thing is you got to make sure, you don't drop it on the bumper plate so it comes back up. So here's the idea. So Doug, if you pick up the lift. If you get I got to look for him. If you have a chance to run across Jeff Pittman, in 2002, I took Coach Pittman, he was at Boise State, I took Coach Pittman's strength and conditioning principles because I wanted to live what you guys do. And it was unbelievably informative. And Jeff kind of helped me reinforce this eccentric slide position. But the key to the eccentric slide is this, is that if you're going to go from the hang position, the most important thing is the athlete lowers the bar by pushing their hips back, and as soon as they get there, they get out of there. Otherwise, what will happen is then they shift forward. So anything that can be done from the blocks can be done from the high hang power position, above the knee, and as Doug said, if you really want to stretch it, that below the knee staying flat-footed, you can get this exact same benefits that you would from off the blocks. So Doug, if you'll go ahead and give me a power snatch with the eccentric slide above the knee. Great. And once again, there's Jeff. So Jeff, you got to stand up because you helped me under there. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I tell you, if I did not spend that semester with Coach Pittman, I would have never have gained what your world is like because it was an eye-opener. I just have to teach them how to snatch, clean, and jerk. You've got snatch, clean, jerk, agilities, endurance, anaerobic threshold. Oh yes, and their sport. And so my hat is off to you for what you do because it is amazing how you accomplish the skill sets for your athletes that you do. Yes?
Is there like a sequence of movements that you guys use kind of like to warm up? Maybe like something easy to teach the athlete proper technique, like move the ball?
And you know this, and I really appreciate that. Do you have a snatch complex?
Somewhat.
Okay, well here, let me cripple myself for your enjoyment.
I mean, I can do it if you tell me.
No,
This one's not on me.
even though I'm going to die, I don't want to break my phone. It's got all kinds of names to it. Here's a real standard one, okay? So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Feet in the land position. Muscle snatch, muscle snatch, muscle snatch. Ow, 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 ow. Oh, 3 more, okay. So that, my athletes all do that. So that's just a standard snatch complex. I'm going to go over here and have a seizure.
No more hours? I didn't hear any more hours, so you must be ready to go. Any other questions? Yeah.
So obviously that works for people whose arm length works for conventional bar. What happens when you're working with somebody who's like 6 feet, 6'9", and working in there?
I can't say that I've worked with guys that are that tall. I have some experience. I interned at the University of Michigan for a short time and helped out with their basketball team. And I know as far as, and something I actually had in my notes, forgot to mention, is when you have athletes that are that tall and have limb lengths that long, they're not getting in the right positions off the floor. So, right, it's just impossible. No matter how good their mobility is, their limbs are just too long. So they'll set up from the floor and be like the hunchback, right? So bringing the bar to them, using blocks and stuff. As far as the arm length, that's not necessarily gonna help with that, right, for the lockout position. But I mean,
I really appreciate the question, because there is a point where, so the tallest weightlifter ever to medal at the Olympic Games was in 2004. The Bulgarians had a guy that was 6'8", and he got the bronze medal. I mean, if you left him alone, he would have been on the outside, you know, and you saw him. I mean, he got pinched. There will be a point in time where it is not prudent for the athlete's safety that they perform a specific exercise. So the last thing you want to do is have people snatching and they can't extend their elbow because they got a 7 foot. It's only 5 feet in between, so if you got a 7'4" wingspan, it would be. So I mean, so what we do is we tell them there are other sports, okay? Team handball, you know, be the goalie. And so, but what we really do is we go with the clean and we just leave the snatch out of it. The only reason that you really want to, if I could do one lift, I would back squat. I think we all understand that. If I could do a second lift, I would snatch, simply because the application is longer, the bar moves at much quicker speeds than it does in the clean. And so when you're doing that, once again, you know your athlete better than anything, and we want athletes to want to train. We want athletes to want to come into the fitness center, into the strength and conditioning. So why frustrate them when there are derivatives that the athlete can benefit from? So we would just say, look, we understand this, we're just going to do cleans.
Or another way, if you want them in that position, but they just can't put it over their head safely, just do pulls. You know, they can still be in that snatch grip, but instead just do pulls and don't catch. Other questions?
What are some of the mobility exercises that you find most effective? Let's say like the ankle, someone has really stiff ankles.
I don't get too fancy with my stuff. I'm really basic. So just like the wall stretches for the ankle, right? So putting the foot close to the wall, trying to reach the wall while keeping the flat foot, things like that. The foot flat. Or I work with judo athletes, so I'll put a band around their foot, have them sit on the floor, put the other end of the band on a post of a squat rack or something, and just have them do circles while trying to keep the knee still, so they're not moving at the knee, they're just moving at the ankle. Things like that help to break up some stuff in there.
And here, this is an excellent question. The vast majority of errors come from 3 sources: grip, stance, position. And so a lot of times what happens is, in weightlifting, it isn't that the ankle is immobile. It isn't that the athlete lacks courage, strength, intelligence. You know, what it is they got their feet in the wrong place. Because it's a very subtle difference between getting your feet where your hips can descend between and below and keeping your torso upright, than putting them too close together and all of a sudden, there you are. So one of the things, and with grip, it's crazy. You can move them out half a thumb and you've solved the problem. So as a coach, with the barbell, you're going to have to find out where is that pattern of movement most beneficial for that athlete. So a lot of times you'll find, and you know this, I don't know what it is, but big weightlifters can make themselves really teeny when they lift. You know, they don't get their feet out, they don't stand up, they don't use their height to their advantage. So what you want to do is if you teach the progressions, you can find, let's move the feet, let's be willing to adjust and see and get where we want to be. So Doug is exactly right, but you also find out that a lot of times they're really not realizing where they are in that spatial awareness.
Piggybacking off his question on mobility, shoulder mobility and thumb in grip.
Oh, you mean with the hook grip?
Yeah, hook grip.
Okay.
And shoulder mobility.
Yeah, the thing is that in most clean movements, you know, with weightlifters, we pop the lock so when we turn the bar over, we open up the hand. But a lot of times it's the same thing. When the bar goes overhead, if you want to, the famous stack the bones, what you find is a lot of times is that if the grip is too wide, they're out of alignment to do that very thing. So it's the same thing. You've got to move the hands in and out. You have to find out specifically. And so if unlocking the thumb helps the athlete push the bar into a better position. I don't like, have you ever seen guys fingertip jerk? I don't like fingertip jerking, but I understand that most fingertip jerkers, their brain knows what they want to do. So what you would do, once again, is you would unhook and then you would start seeing if the skill is there unhooked and just let them go ahead. There's two acceptable grips. There's the traditional grip and the hook. We don't recommend, I've seen it, I would never recommend an open grip, you know, but I understand that. So I probably didn't answer your question very well, but the thing you do is just, if that causes significant problems, then just don't have them do it. It's not going to make, since they aren't competitive weightlifters, it's not going to make that big a difference to them.
Other questions? Lou?
Mike, in your snatch complex, you demonstrated muscle snatches and high pulls. Can you talk a little bit about that? I don't think you mentioned previously. Do you use them in training at all?
Yeah, okay, here's the thing. I had a kid one time and he goes, I don't understand, you know, you say pull with a straight arm, keep the bar close, elbows up, high and outside. And so he shows me this picture of this athlete from Croatia who weighs 77 kilos and he's cleaning 217.5. So he weighs 162 pounds and he's got 473 on the bar. And he's like this. And the guy goes, his arm is bent. And if you look really carefully, his hair is up in the air. He's already pulling under. You know, so the idea, here's the problem. That's an incorrect statement. Here's the issue with a high pull. Yes, we want the elbows up. If you watch world-class weightlifters, when they snatch or clean, they cast a shadow on their singlet. That's how much. But what people fail to understand is they are already pulling under. So the problem, if you teach the high pull, it's fine if they high pull. But watch. You know, they start pulling themselves under. So, you know this, you're teachers. Just because you say it doesn't mean it's heard. And so that's the idea. So the muscle snatch is to teach them to push up and lock. The high pull is, once again, it's just shoulder warm up so that the elbow is ready to move and push up. So it's a warm up drill. I'm terrible. I'm the originator of the straight bar pull. But my kids, when we pull, it's like a power shrug. Our arms only bend to pull us under.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. I never use, especially when I'm teaching an athlete how to snatch or clean, I never use high pulls in their programs because it's just teaching them to start to pull with their arm, right? It's just activating that bicep and teaching them bad motor habits right from the beginning, which we don't want. Other questions?
So in terms of doing a power snatch and power clean, I know it increases speed underneath the bar, but when you're coaching sport and you're teaching contact sport, do you think it has a difference with teaching someone a classic snatch where you're maybe moving the bar this high and getting underneath that bar, or moving it, saying that we're going to move it higher up?
That is, once again, and I really appreciate these because these are really good questions. For weightlifters, it's actually easier to pull under than it is. I mean, I don't want to talk about what I lifted, but my hang snatch was only 5 kilos less than my snatch, but my power snatch was 30 kilos less than my snatch. I was not very strong, you know, so the thing is, it depends. If you're still trying to work on this, there's no reason to do full squats. Now, in the snatch. Now we teach it because we're focused on the change of direction. So the more they pull under, the more dynamic they are in the transition and destroying horizontal displacement. But in the end, everyone is going to migrate towards the things that are beneficial for their athletes. So if you're happy with power snatches, then that's wonderful, that's great. The neural recruitment change is really, the more you pull under, the more classical, the more you're working towards competition, right?
Yeah.
On the complex list, like the power snatch with squat, do you reset each lift?
So his question was on the complex lifts, do you reset with each position? Generally, as Mike said, yes, because you're, again, trying to ingrain that motor habit, excuse me. So in ingraining that habit and restarting from that, usually it's a power position if it's a hang complex each time, and then going down to each of the individual positions.
Right.
And it's also so you can that athlete can get set in the proper position to start.
I'll stay if you have a question. I can see because people got to get going. Hey, you were great. Thank you.
Hey, thanks guys. Appreciate it.